Hello, and welcome to Nightmare Masterclass. My name is David Stockdale. I'll be your host on this excursion into the dark unknown. In this installment, I'll be responding to some comments from my latest video in the Petscop Investigation series. I receive a ton of good comments, and unfortunately, I'm only able to respond to a select few. But I do just want to say thank you to all the people who have offered their thoughts, shared feedback, constructive criticism, all that good stuff. I am very fortunate to have a generally good-natured viewership, so again, thank you. Prior to getting started, I obviously need to address the elephant in the room. As you probably know by now, the creator of Petscop has revealed himself. If you aren't aware of the situation, check out the Petscop Subreddit and read up on these latest occurrences. These are some fairly interesting developments, aren't they? I, for one, am deeply appreciative of Tony for creating Petscop. I'm so glad I got a chance to tell him directly. Petscop is the emergence of a new form of storytelling. It's one that reflects on the complexity brought about by the internet. To put it simply, this is storytelling for the 21st century. Part 8 of my investigation series will discuss the nuances of this topic. First off, I want to at least try to discourage the formation of parasocial relationships with the creator of this work. If you aren't familiar with the term parasocial relationship, you should definitely check out film critic Shannon Strucci's video on the topic, because in addition to being informative, it's also absolutely fascinating. I'll include a link in the video description. At any rate, I've noticed a somewhat disturbing trend on the Petscop subreddit, which basically entails latching onto every single bit of engagement the creator has carried out on Twitter, to the degree that people are digging into his history and scrutinize everything he said or done. And I mean, while I certainly understand why people are curious about the artist, I'd like to just use my platform to discourage obsessively looking into his past or attaching too much significance to the creator's comments. He's just a person out there in the world, you know? So, chill out, is all I'm trying to say. Don't get too carried away. Take it easy. Also, I think at this point, I should just note that any comments the creator might have with respect to his work will very likely not have a major impact on my analysis. And the reason for that has to do entirely with my critical approach. So, if you're not aware, allow me to give you a little insight with respect to my analytical process. If you haven't watched my video about Roland Barthes's Death of the Author, please check it out. But for the purpose of expedience, I'll do a brief summary on my view here. I do not acknowledge the authority of the author, creator, or artist to dictate the meaning of a work. Rather, if there is any meaning to be gathered, it will be contained within the work and perhaps certain real-world references, allusions, etc. If the creator does make a good argument for their particular view of the work, citing evidence from the work, I may be compelled by said argument, but in that case, it depends entirely on the argument presented, not the speaker's status as author or creator. I don't believe the validity of such arguments is contingent upon the creator's authority, as some might argue. For instance, one might say something along these lines: Dave, you argued for X. However, the creator asserted Y. Y must be correct because the creator said it. In my view, this is not an appropriate rationale. Rather, it's an appeal to authority, i.e., the creator's authority. And as I previously stated, this is not an authority I acknowledge. My stance is simply that the creator shouldn't be thought of as the final word merely because they're the creator. What I am against fundamentally are vulgar appeals to authority. So, a creator may very well have a good point to make about their work, but it should be evaluated on the basis of what it is they're saying, and whether or not that is conceivably reflected in the work, not the mere fact that they're the creator. You're obviously free to think whatever you want, but this is how I operate. I'm just trying to be transparent. And, I'm not terribly concerned about this with respect to Petscop because it doesn't seem as though the creator is very keen on dictating the meaning of the work. It kind of seems like he's going the David Lynch route, which I admire. And of course, there is an important distinction between talking about what you are going for with a work and telling people what it means in an authoritative sense. I'm obviously quite interested in the production aspect of the various details Tony has relayed with respect to Petscop. But like I said, I kind of think that's not going to impact my analysis in any concrete manner. I'd also like to say, be leery about anyone who seems to think they have a grasp on the intentions of an artist, especially when they try to use that as the rationale for their interpretation of a work. The least interesting interpretations often contain the pretense of having an accurate, intimate understanding of the creator's perspective. Be very skeptical of anyone who pretends to be inside the mind of an author, creator, artist, or what have you. They most likely aren't, and even if they were, that doesn't automatically make their interpretation the quote-unquote right one, so to speak. In other news, the writing phase of the 8th and final Petscop investigation is in process. The word count is quickly jumping, and I can already tell it's going to be a long video. And rightfully so, I would say, since it's a comprehensive analysis of the entire series. I still have a ways to go, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I am shooting to have this video finished by the end of the year. That's an ambitious goal, but I believe it's entirely within reason. Okay, that was a lengthy preamble, but now that it's out of the way, let's proceed to the comments. Ren Dalton suggests that Paul is not so much a narrator per se, but rather a character who serves as a conduit through which we can experience the world of Petscop, which I think fits nicely within the context of its aesthetic presentation as a sort of Let's Play series. Ren also suggests that Petscop is employing a technique known as metalepsis, which is basically taking a word or a phrase and using it in another context. I think this is an apt observation, and there are a few instances in which one might argue the work is doing this. For instance, the word casket is employed in an interesting manner. It's used to refer to several items, each of which are, of course, not caskets. I'll be going into that a bit further in the next installment of the investigation series. M asks, have you heard about the theory that Paul is trans / the Paul is care theory? If so, what do you think of it? So, I addressed this in a live stream a while back, and I certainly don't fault anyone for not remembering or knowing that. The idea that Paul is transgender is a very common theory. The theory basically posits that Paul and Care are actually the same person. So the theory entails that Paul was assigned female at birth and later underwent a transition and changed his birth name Carrie to Paul. This also might explain the various allusions in the series to facial changes, and the work certainly interrogates matters of identity, so it's not surprising that some have speculated along these lines. As to its validity at the level of the text, I believe the work remains ambiguous on this matter, but I definitely think this is an area worth exploring further. I would also love to hear if any transgender people have thoughts about this theory, as they're obviously going to be more adept at picking up on elements of the work that touch on this, and they very well could pick up on something that went completely over my head. So thanks, Em, for the question. Eli asks a very practical question. Are you going forward with the Petscop Investigation Part 8, or are you going to wait until the quote-unquote one thing that marks the official end of Petscop? So just a bit of context here. One helpful tidbit of information the creator relayed is that Petscop is over with the exception of quote-unquote one thing. Obviously, I'm highly curious as to what that one thing entails, and there's been a lot of wild speculation on it, but the consensus seems to be that it's the original soundtrack, which I, for one, would be completely psyched to listen to. But for the time being, I'm going to keep my head down and continue working. Cathel Diem says, Is it possible that the work is implying that Belle is adopted into the family? Maybe at the time the developers didn't count her as true family, hence why she doesn't have a room in the library. It would make some sense if the family adopted Belle and tried to turn her into Tiara. That could also tie into Paul's comment on the friend not being a part of the family, and then, quote unquote, not meaning it like that. Thanks for the comment. You know, that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't believe we're going to get a definitive answer on this question, but Belle being adopted is something that fits quite well in consideration of some of the themes of Petscop, namely the commodification of children. So yeah, I think this theory has legs. Good work. Casey says, so the last episode says around the end, thank you, Auntie, for making all this possible. If you see her, I mean, not everyone can. So Casey is wondering what the subtext is of this particular sentence. Thank you for the comment. So this is an open-ended, ambiguous plot point in the series, and it's one that I have a very specific take on. I'll get into it a bit more in depth in the next video, but what I'll say for now is that perhaps we should be thinking metaphorically about this idea of not being able to see someone. Forget the supernatural stuff or the, possibility of some kind of M. Night Shyamalan style plot twist. Just forget that stuff for a moment. What are the various ways in which we might not be able to see someone in a figurative sense? Anyway, thanks again for the question. Vervware says, in the most recent Petscop, Paul mentions locations in the game having similar distances between real-life counterparts. Some people from the subreddit have noticed the area code being 203 in Connecticut from the censored phone number a while back as well. My question is, if we compare distances and landmarks from the game to real-life counterparts, what city has the closest resemblance? So, thanks for the comment. I'm not entirely sure if there is indeed a real-world connection here. Rather, I think these could be details designed to give the work some kind of verisimilitude. But it's worth looking into. If anyone has anything else to add, I'd be interested in reading more about this possibility. Katie says, these videos are the only way I can understand the series anymore. Thanks for the comment, Katie. While I appreciate the sentiment and I'm extremely flattered that some people find my work to be useful, I like to discourage using my investigation series as the sole means to understand Petscop. I totally understand that people have a limited amount of time, accounting for school and jobs and time with friends and family, and I understand the utility of my videos as a way to kind of synthesize a fairly large amount of information. Fair enough. But I would like to emphasize that I'm just one person, and the investigation series presents my perspective on the work. I'm not the final word on anything, and it'd probably be helpful to check out other perspectives if you get a chance. It certainly helped me. Kat says, I remember watching Paul's guardian get hit by the car and genuinely jumping out of my seat. This series is proof that horror can be as simple as a sprite being run over after a crudely animated, glowing orange car hits it to be jarring and startling enough to freak me out after all these episodes. Well said, Kat. Gaint Xander says, I don't know why, but Nightmare Masterclass saying disheveled is oddly unnerving to me. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to say disheveled. Thank you for the comment, Xander. Jonathan Joestar says, I probably said this already, but here it is. I believe that the accident board game icon of the yellow connecting to the red is Care slowly being turned into Paul, because Care's text font is yellow, while Paul's text font is red. Also, when Care B is put into the machine, Paul plays it wrong, and what comes out is a yellow and red egg. So what I'm saying is, Paul is a literal accident. This is a really interesting connection that hadn't occurred to me, so thanks for pointing it out. Torque Hansomson says, I note you don't note that the saves lower down the list have a disk icon, presumably indicating that they are on the game disk and are ROM. So just in case you didn't notice, I thought I'd point it out. Seems like the sort of thing one might miss. One interesting element, I suppose, is that Family 3 is RAM and Family is ROM. Yet another interesting observation. At this point, I'm not entirely sure what the significance is between the ROM save files and the memory card, but it's definitely worth thinking about. Thanks for the comment. Aquabat Lover 04 says, "Dude, the only reason I've been watching your Petscop Investigation videos is to get to this one because the preview had the Rudd Files frame in it. I thought that you were somehow going to tie Paul Rudd to Petscop. I'm so upset." Thanks for the comment, Aquabat's Lover. Alas, the legal entity known as Paul Rudd is in no way associated with Petscop nor Nightmare Masterclass. But I'll go ahead and take this opportunity to say, if you're looking for something a bit on the lighter side, check out my comedy podcast, The Rudd Files. We recently did a full commentary on the classic Rudd acclaimed film, Mac and Me, which I assure you is one of the most absurd films of the 20th century. So check it out. Robert Cornhole says, "Interesting things about ships in bottles re the ghost room. The ship is built inside the bottle entirely from the outside. Once the ship is complete, it can't be taken outside of the bottle without breaking it." Very interesting observation, Mr. Cornhole. One major implication that we can glean from the phrase ship in a bottle is that whatever is inside said bottle cannot be extracted without breaking it. What exactly does this mean with respect to Petscop? I'm not entirely sure, but it's something to keep in mind. Darrell says, "One thing to note that I haven't seen discussed is that Petscop references Easter several times, which is the most famous rebirth ever, and it's seen as a positive. Not sure how it fits into the big picture, but that's your job to figure out." You're correct, Darrell. That is my job. One thing I'll add at this point is that I think there may be a subtle connection in the series between resurrection and the various allusions to rebirthing. That said, I hope to flesh out the thematic significance of certain religious references made in the series in the 8th installment of the Petscop Investigation. Cyber RBY asks, "Is Auntie Anna the same person who left the note their husband may come home and asking the person to stay overnight?" The only reason I bring this up is in both texts it says so. Thanks for the question. I believe that yes, the work is strongly implying that Auntie Anna is the very same person who left the note back in the frozen house. As you pointed out, the speaker in both notes exhibit a similar mannerism, this tendency to say so when expressing an extreme degree of a certain emotion. A user named James V offered some insight with respect to the sorting test depicted in Petscop 19. I believe I understand what the sort test recording is about. It's Generation 1, which means it's during the initial development of the game. The sort test is testing the code for printing sprites. When printing sprites in older game engines, not sure on the particulars of the PlayStation games, you feed the sprites a bundle of sprites and it prints them in order. If you don't sort them by how close they are to the screen, the game will print one sprite over another in a way that looks incorrect. You can see that he is going through each item to make sure the sprites interact with the sorting system he's using properly. This includes some sprites that are on the ground, which are always printed behind other sprites. I can't attest to the accuracy of this since, I don't have experience designing video games, but it sounds on the money to me. Puckbrin says, "I'm having a pickle where your voice is too calming and relaxing, and I only ever have time to watch this long-form stuff when I'm heading to bed, so I keep falling asleep and I have to watch the video like 6 times to finish it. You mind doing one of these where you just scream the whole time? I'm sure that would be fun for all involved." Thanks for the comment, Puck. That is a bit of a pickle, isn't it? So for the next installment of the investigation series, I will be screaming the entirety of my analysis. Pinbacker says, throughout the series, a ton of fascinating leads have been teased but never really shown in detail. Off the top of my head, there's the symbols on the calendar in the frozen house, the fuck recording, the illegible writing on the chalkboard, Hudson, the website, and so on. Should the series continue, what might we get to learn more about? P.S. Any plans for a sheriff domestic investigation? So, for those who aren't in the know on such matters, someone did a very clever parody of Petscop. It's called Sheriff Domestic, and at this point, I'll just say that I have no plans for a sheriff domestic investigation, but never say never. With respect to the latter query, I believe these various leads tend to make sense within the context of Petscop when you consider that they are merely suggesting a broader fictional universe. If you were to play a game like this in a real-world situation, you might come across details that aren't immediately relevant to your situation. These details very well could make sense in a given context, but that context is not always made available to the viewer. Sometimes the function of these details in the work is simply to impress upon the viewer that what they are witnessing is only a small sliver of a much larger world. Of course, this might not satisfy everyone, but it is a consistent quality of Petscop, the series. And it's something I started to catch on to towards the last few installments of the investigation series. You might remember me urging viewers not to think of Petscop like a puzzle to be solved. I stand by this proposition. So, if Petscop's not a puzzle, what is it? Stay tuned because I will be attempting to answer this very question in the 8th and final installment of the Petscop Investigation. That wraps it up for this comment response video. If you enjoy my videos and have a few bucks to spare, you can support me for as little as $1 a month on patreon.com/Nightmare Masterclass. All patrons get early access to my podcast, Nightmare Tonight, as well as access to premium episodes and other various goodies. And if you'd like to make a one-time donation, you can do so by going to ko-fi.com/Nightmare Masterclass. Thank you for watching, and good night.